This episode and every episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show is brought to you by Ironmonger Brewing. Visit Ironmonger at their tap room in Marietta, Georgia, or online at ironmongerbrewing.com.
Open up a tab, grab a seat, and pour a pint. It's time for the Beer Guys Radio Show.
You want free beer? Go to the brewery.
Dedicated to the art, science, and enjoyment of craft beer.
Yo, what's wrong with the beer we got?
Now, here are your hosts, Tim Dennis and Brian Hewitt.
And welcome to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We're broadcasting from the Beer Guys Radio Studios in Marietta, Georgia. And this week we're talking with La Cumbre Brewing from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm Tim Dennis, and with me as always is my good friend and co-host, Brian Hewitt.
Hey, Tim. So joining us today, we have Jeff Erway, the founder of La Cumbre Brewing. He's the founder, nothing else. That's it. Probably the brewer too, I would imagine. So probably does some brewing. Anyway, we're going to talk about award-winning beers, judging at the Great American Beer Festival, and we're going to geek out a bit over hops and IPAs and possibly other things too. Jeffrey, thanks for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Jeff, is that without a doubt the finest introduction you've ever had on a show before?
A+, man.
It was probably my finest, right? I'm sure.
Your finest, yeah. Yeah, Jeff, well, again, man, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. We enjoy your beers. Brian did some traveling out, and we've had friends that have gone out to the Southwest and got some of your brews over to us. And you made your best effort to get beers to us, and we were let down by the FedEx or UPS service today. So, but we'll get those. We're looking forward to getting those once we hunt them down. But how's things going for you? Well, this week, drink anything interesting? Do anything interesting?
Well, things are, business-wise are looking a lot better than they have been for the last 3 months. Mm-hmm. As far as drinking some new interesting things, the new Project Dank came out, and so that satisfied, that satiated me for my West Coast IPA fix, and then. I unfortunately, since the tap rooms have started reopening around here, I haven't gotten out to any of my friends' places yet. But I'm planning a nice long bike trek with a good friend of mine on Saturday morning, and we're gonna try to hit up as many of the tap rooms as we can.
That sounds good. Do you normally get out to? Do you do a good job of getting around to the other breweries out there?
Not as good as I did before I had 2 children.
Sure. Okay. Okay.
That would do it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I definitely have my places that I like to check out, especially, places that are, I like to check up on former coworkers that, used to work here and then have gone on and graduated to a head brewer's job at some other place. I always like checking out on them and seeing how their beer's doing. And I also have a couple places that focus on things that my brewery does not focus on. And I like to,
Sure.
I like to see how they're doing too. I like to, just try to keep up on what's available around town.
That's what we always hear brewers talk about. They're so busy at their brewery, they don't get out and get to see as much. I know that's one reason they talk about enjoying, the festivals and collaboration brew days and that, because they finally get out and get to see and drink the other beers out.
It brings it all to them. They don't have to make the effort to go out.
Everybody coming together. What about you, Brian? Anything interesting?
Well, I did get into another Drink Your Cellar pick this week. I drink your cellar. I opened a 2013 Stone Old Guardian Oak Smoked, and it held up pretty well. It wasn't as smoky as I expected it to be. Okay. It was far more oaky, and I don't know if that is a function of time, 7 years. Maybe that diminishes smoke. I wouldn't think so, but maybe it does. But it was really oaky. I figured you probably wouldn't be a big fan of that.
Probably not.
So it wasn't one I was saving to open with you, but yeah, that was exciting. And I actually recently picked up a beer cocktail book, and I paged through it looking for the easiest recipe I could find, and I made it. It's called the Sympathy for the Devil, and it's basically you swirl absinthe in a glass, you pour in an ounce and a half of gin, and then you top it with a Belgian Golden Ale. It's pretty good.
You're good with that? Okay.
Yeah,
are there any other beer cocktails in your cocktail book?
Oh, there's a bunch more, but they're really involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the thing with cocktails. Beer, man, it's easy to make a glass of
right.
beer. There's no work that's involved there. Jeff, do you do any beer cocktails?
No, I generally try to keep my cocktails separate from my beer.
Okay. All right.
But I've been known to drink plenty of margaritas.
Yeah, that's, I've tried beer cocktails I enjoy, and that it's not my thing. I do enjoy a michelada. I'll do some of those for sure. Absolutely. Brian, I don't even remember what I drank this week. It was kind of a stressful week. We spent a work day in the studio last weekend working on our gear here, getting everything going. And I don't even remember what all I got into. I did get into one of my Drink Your Cellars, a 2016 release King's Ransom Baltic Porter.
That's a good one.
From Creature Comforts and Other Half collaboration. It held up pretty well, so it was pretty tasty there. And enjoyed that. I don't think we didn't get out to any new breweries this week. We failed as beer drinkers this week.
Well, yeah, you know what? Even when we were in here working on some technical issues in the studio, we weren't drinking that much. We were more.
We were working.
We were drinking in frustration.
We had beers.
Yeah,
we had beers. What did we have when we were in here, Brian?
Boy, I'm trying to think what we had. All the stuff I have is things I had elsewhere. I can't even think of what it was.
It's not important. No. We'll make it through there. So.
Anyway, let's get into the beers of the week.
Crack open a cold one. It's the Truck and Tap Beer of the Week. Woo-hoo! Craft beer and food trucks in downtown Woodstock. Truckandtap.com.
Well, Brian, as always, we have a great selection of beers. Now, I'm going to tell you beers that we're going to drink from La Cumbre when we get them. We've got Zuzak's. We have their Slice of Heffen, Acclimated Pale Ale, Elevated IPA, the summer version of their, what's that one called? Your summer version that you sent, Jeff?
Project Dank.
Project. I couldn't read my own writing here. And so we'll get into those. We do have for the show this evening, Abomination was kind enough to send us a care package. We got a very cool little packet of broccoli cheese grains in there.
Like a grain bowl.
With the beer, a grain bowl. A grain bowl and beer. So we're going to get into their Wandering into the Fog with Sabro hops, which I'm a fan of. We'll get into a beer from the Rare Beer Club called Brewery. I'm not going to say this right. Sauli, S-A-U-L, Saul.
I'm not sure.
Better Call Saul.
Better Call Sauli.
We just got into one of the new Monday night Hop Hut releases. That's a collaboration with WeldWorks, the Road Full of Promise 2X Northeast IPA. We also have a Fat Orange Cat, Ask Forgiveness, Not Permission Northeast IPA. And they're ones that are fairly new.
That's also Georgia. The way I live my life.
That's it. Yeah. That's the way you got to do it, man. Just rock on. So plenty to drink and do and talk about today. So, Brian, what's happening this week in the craft beer news?
What's in the news? The beer guys have the scoop.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Time for headlines.
All right, so I'm going to get started with a little bit of sad news this week. According to the Miami Herald, the founding brewer for MIA Beer Company died in an automobile accident last weekend. Piero Rodriguez was just 34 years old, which is just tragic, you know. Great up-and-coming brewery. Actually, it was a big deal in Florida, and he's so young. But apparently, Rodriguez was heading home after a late shift, and he lost control of his car. Friends and family have set up a GoFundMe page to raise funds for his son. If you're interested in contributing, go check that out on GoFundMe. I'd read the URL, but it's got a lot of weird characters at the end of it. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
We'll include it in the website post this week. Yeah.
So this is fun, and it's not really craft beer related exactly, but it's too amusing not to mention. Bud Light is promising free hard seltzer to Columbus, Ohio, if they change their name, and the new name has to be Flavortown. Yes. Apparently, there's a petition on change.org to rename the city, which is currently named after Christopher Columbus, to the new name, which is, of course, a Guy Fieri reference, who was born in Columbus, but also reference to Columbus, Ohio's reputation as a test market for the food industry. So if you've had something brand new at a restaurant chain, there's a good chance Columbus had it first, and they passed their opinion on it.
I support this change, and we have a friend that lives in Columbus that is in support of the change. I would live in Flavortown.
I would want to visit Flavortown. Yes.
I think Wendy's is based near there. You've got, the Ohio State University where they test a lot of things out in that. So, yeah, I'm all about the change for sure.
And maybe go there when they're celebrating with all that free seltzer, whatever that's going to be from Bud Light.
Quite a party, bro.
That's going to be fantastic. So there's big change coming to the Vermont beer scene. Pioneer Brewery Magic Hat is shutting down its brewery and will be contract brewed by Genesee. I didn't realize this beforehand, but Magic Hat's beers are already, in some part, being brewed by Genesee before this move. But the physical brewery won't sit empty. Burlington, Vermont's Zero Gravity has already made arrangements to move into the space after Magic Hat leaves, buying all the brewery equipment and taking over the lease in what looks to be the smoothest transition of a brewing facility ever recorded. So, as for the reason, it seems to be the best call for Magic Hat in the long term. The last available sales numbers for them show their sales drop from 181,000 barrels in 2014 to just 75,000 barrels in 2017. So 60% decline in 3 years.
I talked to the program director there at our Burlington station, WVMT, and he's pretty bummed about that. Magic Hat, of course, being a Vermont beer drinker, that's just a classic one. Now, talking about smooth transitions, though, we had New Realm go into Green Flash in Virginia Beach as well.
That
So
was pretty smooth, but not
there.
quite as smooth. They
Not
didn't
as
slide
smooth.
in quite as
Okay.
much.
I
So,
got you, man.
yeah.
Sounds good. Well, it is time for a break. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We'll be back very soon to talk more with La Cumbre Brewing.
Craft beer forged with a reverence for tradition and new styles that start a revolution. Ironmonger Brewing. The brewers at Ironmonger Brewing pride themselves at being masters of barrel-aged, hoppy, and sour beers. They invite you to their tap room in Marietta, Georgia to taste and see. Also visit their barrel room for an intimate drinking experience with great live entertainment. Keep up to date on all things Ironmonger by liking them on Facebook. Ironmonger Brewing, establishing a new standard in craft beer.
It's time to take your snack back with bold flavors that complement your latest brew. Southern Recipe Small Batch Pork Rinds will do just that with flavors like Korean Kimchi Barbecue, Honey Chipotle, Cilantro Lime, and more. Munch on these beer-friendly bacon bites right out of the bag or crush them in your favorite recipes as a substitute for breading. Find your next bag at Kroger or go to southernrecipesmallbatch.com for recipes and a buy two, get one coupon. That's southernrecipesmallbatch.com.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Well, I'm sure I'd feel much worse if I weren't under such heavy sedation.
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. Remember, all episodes are available on demand, so if you missed the broadcast, get the podcast. Beer Guys Radio is available on all popular podcasting apps. Now let's get back to our talk with La Cumbre Brewing.
Jeff, once again, we appreciate you joining us this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me
with us here, man. Absolutely. So we've been saying this longer than I wish we had, Brian. We've been saying this every week for a while now, but we don't want to dwell on it, but we do talk about it with the coronavirus pandemic. How are things going there? How are things being handled out there in New Mexico as far as the way businesses can or do operate?
Yeah, well, our governor was definitely pretty conservative with, her opening, reopening of the state. Our tap rooms reopened, a little bit on Friday, the 12th, just 50% occupancy just on the patio. And then on Monday, the 15th, we were allowed to reopen 50% of the interior of our tap rooms. The one thing that she did that I definitely disagreed with, I didn't see how it really helped anything, was she did close down the liquor stores for about 10 weeks, which
Really?
Okay.
She closed down all the independent liquor stores, which really hurt the independent liquor stores a lot, but it also hurt our local breweries that, because so much of us are focused on, a broad plethora of different beers, being on the store shelves and places like Kroger. While they do a great job of supporting our core brands, it's a little harder to get the 60 barrel or 120 barrel batch of beer that you brewed onto their shelves. They want to make sure that whatever they're putting on is going to be available for a while. So that was disappointing, but our company has been really fortunate that, we were positioned the way we were in the market to deal with this. I think a lot better than a lot of others. I feel, absolutely horrible for some of the really small, tap room facilities, the places that only run, one or two tap rooms, that have just been shut down and don't have much beer in package. That's a really rough place to be.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I think here we lost one of our favorite beer bars, but I don't think we've had a brewery that's taken the hit yet.
Not yet. Knock on wood.
Point. But yeah, we did have one of our beer bars that had to close because of coronavirus, what it did to them. And then I saw another bar down in Edgewood area of Atlanta close. They've been there, I think 8-10 years, and they said they just couldn't get through it. But Georgia was not conservative, Jeff. You probably heard us on the news.
I did hear that.
Yeah. So we're dealing with all that now and everything. How are people about wearing their masks out there? Is it a controversial thing? Are they pretty compliant?
Yes and no. I mean, I think
Okay.
I think across the country it's become the calling card of the Democrats, liberals to absolutely wear masks wherever they go, and it's become the calling card of conservatives to really resist mask wearing. And I think It's unfortunate.
What a ridiculous country we live in,
right? It's the red hat. It is now the red hat for the other side, I guess. But I had to wear one today, Tim. I hated it, but
it happens.
Yeah, I had to go into the DMV. Yep.
Yeah. It's just preposterous to me. I feel like whatever your stripes are, at the end of the day, what we all should be focused on is getting past this, getting through this together, right? And if there's any chance that wearing a mask will help us do that more expediently, then just freaking wear a mask.
Right. Sure.
I wear a mask 5, 6, 7 hours a day, and after a week, I didn't even notice it was there anymore. I can't fathom why this is such a big deal. But
I don't like wearing masks, and I forget mine a lot, I'll be honest, but I actually ordered a pack of 24 masks today, Brian.
Did you? Okay.
So I can be ready and have more, at the ready there. But, I don't get the argument on whether or not they're effective, because they tell you to cover your mouth when you sneeze, cough into your elbow or whatever. Having a layer of cloth on your face is going to stop
a lot more of it.
A lot,
probably more of it.
No matter how you look
at
it, it's going to stop some stuff, So
Right.
I don't see how it couldn't help at least some.
Now I have to ask. You mentioned it earlier that your state had closed the independent liquor stores. Were state-run liquor stores still allowed to operate? Because I got to know.
We don't have state-run liquor stores.
Okay.
All right.
So our grocery stores are allowed to sell beer, wine, and liquor. And so the argument is that what does it matter? You've got the grocers are still selling. And so, this was an enormous gift to the very largest of suppliers, as well as the grocery stores. But, from my perspective, I just never understood how that kept the public any safer by piling more people into a single store. Whereas, if you just tell the independent liquor stores that normally could have, let's say, 25, 30 people in there, well, now you can only have 10 people at a time, and everybody's staying socially distanced. I don't see how closing them made anyone safer. That was my only.
And anybody can do curbside. A little place can do curbside. Just call ahead, and they'll bring it out to the curb.
Again, one of those things that's illegal in New Mexico. You are not allowed to sell. We don't have delivery, and we don't have curbside service. Okay. You can't sell the beer outside of your licensed premises.
Interesting. Well, I will say that I think that's one good thing that happened in Georgia through all of this is they kind of passed an emergency referendum that allowed restaurants and stuff to deliver beer. Like if you got some food through Uber Eats, you get beer. And restaurant could sell like bottles of beer to go, which they couldn't do before. And we actually just this week, the Senate passed a bill allowing like courier services to deliver alcohol from restaurants, liquor stores, and grocery stores. Now, you were talking earlier about kind of who's allowed to do what and, distribution and that. Of course, breweries and brew pubs were exempted. They're not allowed to be involved in this. And, the gentleman that sponsored the bill has sponsored other beer bills. He sponsored the brunch bill to get earlier brunch and that. But if you look at his campaign contributions, there's a decent amount of cash from the wholesale lobby there.
That's right.
And so you see, and as long as breweries and brew pubs are not allowed to do delivery, everything else is still going through distribution there.
Indeed.
So interesting. Yep. But anyhow, beer laws. What fun, right, Jeff?
So amazing.
My favorite.
Absolutely. Well, hey man, we want to talk a little bit about your background before brewing. Now, if we see correctly, you were a jazz guitarist prior to brewing. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
sure.
I tried.
Yeah.
I tried. Yeah. I was a band director and music teacher out in the Navajo reservation for 5 years. And lo and behold, there wasn't a lot of really great beer out there. So I started brewing at the age of 22, 23, and I haven't really looked back. It's been pretty much my life's work for the better part of my life. For half my life is to the pursuit of the perfect pint.
Okay.
It's been awfully fun.
What made you abandon the music and go to beer? Just more fulfillment out of the beer, I guess?
I've thought about that a lot. I absolutely loved teaching. I loved the kids part of teaching. I loved being with the kids and teaching them music. That was a lot of fun, but the bureaucracy of it all was not fun. And honestly, I just found something that I was far better at. I found something that, when you're a guitarist, it's like, well, how is it, what separates the good guitarist from the great guitarist? And some people will tell you, well, it's, Charlie Parker sat inside of his apartment for, 10, 11 hours at a time and just played. And well, what gets you to do that? Is it the chicken or the egg? Was it the talent or whatever?
Right.
I just found something that, I got out of work and I could just go into my garage and spend, 8 hours after work just working on my beer, and I got really good at it, and I absolutely loved it. And yeah, luckily things have worked out.
That's kind of how we worked out, because we enjoy running our mouths and beer.
Right.
So boom, Beer Guys Radio is born.
If you can spend 8 hours doing something after work, that's passion right there. That's what that is.
Yeah,
Right.
gotta love it. Absolutely. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We do need to take a break. We'll be back soon to talk about beer judging with La Cumbre Brewing. You know we love good beer, and Athletic Brewing makes non-alcoholic beer that stands shoulder to shoulder with their boozy brethren. With a fraction of the calories and certified organic, it's a great beer to enjoy anytime.
Athletic's got new brews like Cerveza Atletica just in time for summer. Check out the full selection at athleticbrewing.com. Use code BG25 for 25% off your first order, and U.S. customers get free nationwide shipping. Athletic Brewing, brew without compromise.
It's Brian and Tim, the Beer Guys. If you're like us, no lunch or dinner is complete without a pint or two of craft beer.
Which is why Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock, Alpharetta, and Duluth are always on our list. Tim, why do they call it Truck and Tap?
Well, the tap part is easy, Brian. They've got 18 of them.
As for the truck part, that's where it gets interesting. Truck and Tap features your favorite Atlanta area food trucks, so you're getting a different menu every day.
Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock, Alpharetta, and Duluth.
Truckandtap.com. Let them know that the Beer Guys sent you.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. I want to give a quick shout out to one of our great radio affiliates, WNAE 1310 AM and 96.7 FM in Warren, Pennsylvania. Catch Beer Guys Radio on WNAE every Saturday at 1 a.m. local time. Now let's get back to a conversation with La Cumbre Brewing.
Jeff, we wanted to talk to you about some beer judging. You're a longtime GABF, Great American Beer Festival judge. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So which came first, the brewery or the beer judging?
Well, I was a beer judge through the beer judge certification program before I was ever a commercial brewer. I think I passed that exam back in like 2003 or 2004, and I've been, so I did it, fairly casually, like any homebrew beer judge. And then once I entered the, professional brewing realm, I got, I had some friends that had judged the Great American Beer Festival, and I got interested in doing that. And it's a really great experience because, it's one of the few times during the year where a guy like me can sit down at a table with my peers and really just dive deep into these individual beers and what makes them great or not.
On that note, we've done some homebrew competitions, and with our little homebrew clubs, and we'll taste say half a dozen or 8 of a style of beer. And I've noticed even going through that many beers, it gets harder to judge one to the other, especially if they're all fairly quality beers. What are your tips and tricks for tasting like a big flight?
Don't taste, smell.
Okay.
I start off just smelling every single beer, and I think I would guess that 95% of the time with your nose, you can tell whether or not a beer might move on to the next round. If you're smelling through, let's just take something easy like what I'm drinking here, a Kolsch. If you're smelling through a whole bunch of Kolsches and one of them has isoamyl acetate and one of them has ethyl hexanoate, one of them has hydrogen sulfide, way too much hydrogen sulfide or sulfur dioxide, those beers are really easy to just be like, well, it might be a perfectly fine tasting beer, but it's not a great Kolsch. So, you can very quickly just eliminate beers without even really having to taste them much. And then for the good of the brewer, because they paid money to enter the beer, or they spent time packaging it up for you to sample it. After you've identified those few beers that are either going to be medal winning if you're in those rounds, or in the earlier rounds, the beers that will be moving on to the next rounds. After you've gone through and identified those beers, then you can go back and try the ones that just from your nose you could tell had some underlying flaws. You go back and through and taste them, and let the brewer know what they might have or might not have done right. I also think keeping some really bland things at the table, like matzah bread, is a good idea to clear your palate. Nothing too salty, nothing fatty at all, but just something to clear the palate in between. But I mean, if you're tasting through a bunch of double IPAs, West Coast double IPAs, yeah, man, it gets pretty tiring. But even there, again, the sniff test works. You can identify. I'm sorry, if you have diacetyl in your double IPA, in your West Coast double IPA, I don't care how bitter it is, and I don't care how great it is in every other way. If there's diacetyl there, it is not moving on to the next round, period. And it shouldn't, especially in a competition like the GABF. You should be able to, you tell with your nose easily that beer's not moving on.
Hot buttered IPA.
Yeah, I mean, in that way, it is really brutal. This, being at the table and just it being, like shooting fish in a barrel, where you just, right, playing this process of elimination, constantly just looking for only flaws in beers. Yeah. But by looking for the flaws, you can quickly identify those ones that have none, and that are really worthy of moving on to the next round.
That's a really great approach. I would have never thought of that. I would have been a terrible judge, because I'm going to drink everything.
You're going right in for the drink, right? Yeah.
Now, I do know, I when you're talking about this, I know that this definitely rings true for me, because there have been a number of beers that have been completely ruined based upon the way they smell, not the way they taste, but the way they smell. If it could taste great, but if it smells like dog food, I'm sorry, I'm not into it.
You're out.
I'm out. I'm done.
See?
Yeah.
You can save some time there. Save some palate too.
Exactly right.
The appearance tells you a lot too. If you're telling me that you have a Bohemian style Pilsner that you're sending me, and I get a beer that looks more like a Hefeweizen, which even in the GABF happens, that tells you enough about the beer to know it's not going on to the next round.
It's a Northeast Bohemian.
Right.
Northeast. Double dry hop.
Exactly.
That's right. Yeah. Is it easier to judge like lighter beers or bolder beers? Because I was thinking about that. I could see it going both ways there.
I find it easier. I personally find it easier to judge beers where it's a clearly defined category. Yeah. Judging Kolsch, there's not much wiggle room there, right? And I've been to Cologne, and I have a very distinct idea of exactly what a Kolsch should taste like. And yes, there's a little bit of play there, but when you tell me, like when I get to like a field beer category, or get to other experimental beer category, I'm just like, what does this even mean? Okay, so this is truly hedonistic. Okay, great.
Right.
But it's not, it's not in any way clearly defined.
We've talked to brewers. I think Almanac, I was talking to them at GABF, and they mentioned, we were talking about winning awards, and they said, we love to do it, but especially if you're not clearly defined on what you brew, it's really hard to enter sometimes.
Oh, sure.
With these beers. They said, so we may have a beer, and I know a lot of people that have done this. They've brewed a beer that is just phenomenal, but it may be some kind of unusual hybrid that just doesn't really fit anywhere. And they make the wrong selection of where to enter it. That it's out.
If the color or the smell is off for the category, I can see now why they would not get anywhere in that, even if you were to try it, and you wouldn't if it looked wrong or smelled wrong,
right?
Because there's a million other beers to try.
So I mean, it's no secret that the brewers that tend to win the most medals are also the ones you see at the judging table, and it's not because they're trying to cheat; it's because they've really educated themselves on exactly what to enter and how to where to enter different beers. I think I've been judging with Matt Bernaldson from Firestone Walker since like 2010. And every single year I see that guy at the judging table, and it's no secret that he just keeps on racking up more and more medals because, first of all, his palate's unbelievable, and he's a great brewer, and but even more, just as important as having a great palate, being a great brewer, he knows exactly where to enter those beers. And my friend Ben Edmonds at Breakside's the same way. He knows where to enter the beers, man. He just knows clearly. He's good at identifying where those beers belong.
We talked to him recently,
just a few weeks ago, a month ago or so. We talked to Ben. Sure enough, absolutely.
I talked to him this morning.
Great beer.
Did you? Yeah, we got some Breakside in the fridge here. Actually,
we do.
He's fantastic. Yeah, there's really no better brewer in the country, I don't think.
You were talking about kind of hanging out at the judging tables and that. We have friends in homebrewing that do that. They would look at the list from a homebrew competition and see what styles were the least entered, and then they're like, "I'm going to brew this. I'm going to brew this," and they would, kind of perfect those. I think he's ended up Zane.
Oh yeah, Zane.
I think he's ended up, really dialing in on the Vienna lager and just nailing that. That's his thing now.
I happened to see that he brewed one recently, and he is a harsh critic. He gave his own beer a 3.5 stars or
good.
Caps on Untapped. And
you got to be able to.
I gave him a thumbs up for his honesty. I'll be honest with you. Yeah,
you have to. I am not honest with my beers. I drink them, and I think I look at my beers and I really get, you know what? I enjoy brewing beers. I remember, Jeff, the first beer I brewed, we took it to a homebrew club, and this has been probably a decade ago now, right at it. And I passed it around. And I was so proud. And looking back, it was just not a great beer. It wasn't awful, Brian. I don't think we had any major flaws in it, but the reviews we got were, well, it tastes like beer. And I guess that's a good place to start.
It takes the form of the glass.
That's right. Yes, yes. All the compliments, every single one. Yeah.
It is wet.
It's a very wet beer. Oh, thanks. We were going for that. Yeah. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We do need to take another break, but we'll be back very soon to talk more with La Cumbre Brewing.
Are you really doing Facebook right? I'm Aaron Williams, and here's your Marketing Minute. Facebook is a fantastic place to communicate with your fans. I'm sure you're using it to let people know about your specials, new beers, events. In other words, you're talking at your audience. Instead, try talking with your audience. Start conversations, ask questions, and show your fans what's going on behind the scenes. You'll make more of them, I promise. For more marketing tips and tricks, head to crafted-consulting.com/radio.
Have you ever thought about owning your own brewery but don't know what it takes to get one built? We're Storytime Construction, and we build breweries. We're Georgia's most experienced and hands-on contractors when it comes to building new breweries and tap rooms, or expanding existing breweries. We offer full build-outs, remodeling, and additions, as well as consulting and construction management. Give us a call at 770-733-4343. Storytime Construction. We build breweries.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
To be the man, you gotta beat the man. Woo!
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/beerguys. Patrons get cool perks like Beer Guys swag and commercial-free episodes. Now let's get back to La Cumbre Brewing.
Jeff, we talked a good bit in the last segment about the judging of beers. In beer judging that, we want to get into the brewing of beers here with you some. And one thing you mentioned to us as we were setting up for the show is that you had some recent revelations in regards to hazy IPA production. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, we've been, for the last 3 years, been brewing any hazy IPA we have with London Ale 3, like so many brewers around the country have. And like so many brewers around the country, we struggle with a lot of re-fermentation and all sorts of issues that can come with using that specific ale strain. And, I could spend an hour telling you about the trials and tribulations of dealing with that ale strain. But needless to say, I kind of feel like I've ended a really abusive relationship. And I'm really happy about it. It's one of those things like you wake up the next morning and there's just like this huge weight lifted off your chest. And lo and behold, like, my long lost high school sweetheart calls me up and tells me that she's back in the marketplace, and luckily for
feeling
me,
hazy.
Exactly, and she's feeling hazy. So I had an ale strain at my first job at Cumbre Brewing Company, the old Mendocino ale yeast, and I think Anchor also uses it. I think it's known Y yeast 1272. And I won't name the brewer, but someone here in town had, lo and behold, brewed a hazy IPA with 1272, and I was like, wait a second, there's no way that's good. And I tried it, and I was like, you know what? This has all of the right beginnings of a really good hazy IPA, and it has none of the funky, rotting fruit, durian kind of characteristics that London Ale 3 can kind of throw off. And so we started using it, and oh my God, my life's better now. And honestly, our hazy IPAs are better. They have less yeast going in the package easily. And it's taking sometimes 2 or 3 weeks less time to produce them. The overall beer has better shelf stability because we're able to get down to that 200,000 to 300,000 cells per milliliter going into the can. The beer doesn't have that hot bite that so many hazy IPAs struggle with when they have a ton of yeast in solution. And overall, the overall beer has a much more pleasant ester profile. And so, I'm not an enormous hazy IPA fan, but all of the things that I have not liked about the hazy IPAs, that's now gone from our beers now, including all the headaches of production. I couldn't be happier about it. And honestly, bringing this yeast that I know so well into our brewery now has got me looking around at every other beer that we're producing, and could we really start incorporating this yeast into a lot more of our beers? Because for the longest time, Chico ale yeast has been our go-to yeast, and that's a wonderful yeast. It's very forgiving, and our elevated IPA will certainly always be made with that yeast. But I'm just looking around the brewery at some of these other beers, and like I said, it's like an old friend just re-entered my life, and it's awesome because it's got me probably more inspired on the creative side than I've probably been in a couple of years now. And I wish I felt comfortable naming the brewer that kind of reignited this old flame for me. But he knows who he is, and I owe him a very nice dinner.
I picture you skipping down the road hand in hand with like a Y yeast pouch.
Exactly.
Is that pretty accurate?
Hazy in love is
Hazy
what I was about to say.
Yeah.
And so I'd read something else about this. I had read that you have an incredibly fast turnaround with your IPAs. I also read, and is this go hand in hand with your newfound love in yeast, underpitching it? Is that part of the strategy there with the new yeast, or was that something you were doing prior to that new yeast?
I've used the word underpitching in seminars that I've taught and in some interviews I've given, because so many people, when they talk about pitching, are talking about what the yeast suppliers recommend, what they've seen from instructors on brewing, and that million cells per milliliter per degree Plato was established so that newer brewers or less experienced brewers don't have problem fermentations. But the fact is that if you have healthy yeast, and you've got the right yeast strains, there's no reason you have to pitch that much. And as a matter of fact, sometimes you have healthier fermentations and faster fermentations and very often have more expressive fermentations if you do pitch quite a bit less than 1 million cells per milliliter per degree Plato. For instance, our Hefeweizen, we're very often pitching less than 3 million cells per milliliter, which per degree Plato, that comes out to about only 20% of what would be quote unquote recommended. And our lag phases are like 4 hours, and fermentation for that beer is done. Fermentation for that beer is done in less than 4 days.
See, I remember
That's
brewing.
Impressive.
I mean, Hef is an aggressive yeast anyhow. They'll go crazy, but
They will.
I don't know that I got 4 hours out of it. But so the underpitching, that's something, because as a home brewer starting out, you always see that's beginner advice for you. Make sure you got enough yeast cells.
Yes,
Make
absolutely.
sure you pitch,
even over pitch.
Build it up
cases.
and over pitch.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Well, yeah. So like, if you're talking about home brewers, well, the problem there so often is that you don't have enough yeast, right? But when you get to commercial brewing space, if you're buying your yeast from the lab and you're pitching it to let's say you're pitching to a 10-barrel batch of pale ale, they're going to give you most labs are going to give you 7 million cells per milliliter for that pitch. So maybe a little under pitched, but at the end of the day, it's coming from the lab. It's super healthy yeast. It's going to be fine.
Right. Yeah.
But then you're harvesting into your yeast brink, from the bottom of that tank 6 or 7 days later. And, if you are counting yeast cells, which you should be, if you're counting yeast on a hemocytometer or on a cellometer of some kind, you have quite a bit there. And in my opinion, so often I try beers made with 1056 or 001 or some derivation of that. And they are, you're pitching a million cells per mil per degree Plato, and they are just completely void of fermentation characteristics. And there's really nothing going on besides the malt and hops. And some people think that that's an attribute. And I would argue that it makes for some boring beer sometimes.
Boring.
And
yeah.
There's nothing identifying it really as ale, right? It's kind of the same problem I have with a lot of Kolsch's is that, there's just, especially after going to Cologne a couple times, there's not a lot, a lot of the Kolsch's I try in this country, there's just not a lot defining them as an ale. And they're definitely, identifiably ale. And so I do my best to try to find ways of approaching fermentation to get the best expression out of the yeast that I can. And with a lager, that's never under pitching, quote unquote under pitching. That's always pitching.
Yeah.
That's always pitching, at least 1 million cells per mil per degree Plato, if not a little bit more. But with our ales, there's very few ale yeasts that we will pitch at 1 million cells per mil per degree Plato. We almost always pitch quite a bit less than that, sometimes less than half that. And obviously, like I said, with our Hefeweizen, even less than that, 20%. And I've actually personally pitched Hefeweizen at less than 1 million cells per mil, not per degree Plato, but 1 million cells per milliliter, and had fermentation take off in under 6 hours and the beer finish out just fine. And again, as long as you have enough oxygen, as long as you've got healthy yeast, they very often you can get away with that and often end up with very expressive fermentation characteristics. That being said, you were talking about farmhouse ales earlier with me, and I would never recommend that with farmhouse ales. Those beers should always be pitched at, basically about as much yeast as you can get into them.
Okay.
Oh, really?
See,
okay.
There's so much to this, so many nuances to brewing.
Seriously.
And we talked a little bit about Stan Hieronymus and just the information that he provides, different scientific outlooks on hop usage and, yeast pitch rates. And I think we talked about this on break, but the altitude, the difference in hop usage with altitude and that there's just, and how much beer or how fast you can drink your beer, right?
Exactly.
Right,
so, right.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Stan introduced me to his friend Yvonne Debates from Brasserie de la Seine in Brussels. And, I went to visit them, and they have these 30 and 60 hectoliter fermenters that are I kid you not, they're cylinder conicals, but they are about 8 feet tall. A 60 hectoliter fermenter that's 8 feet tall. And it's because they're trying to get huge amounts of surface to volume ratios,
right?
So that you talk about, expressions of fermentation and stuff, because they want all that fermentation expression. And, you come into most breweries in this country and they're like tall torpedoes, and it's like, and then they're going to, on top of having these, tall torpedoes, which have almost no surface to volume ratio, they're pitching tons of yeast.
Well, Jeff, I hate to say it, but we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want more information about La Cumbre Brewing and what they're up to, go ahead and check them out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, La Cumbre Brewing.
The socials, Brian.
All the
websites,
socials.
all that
absolutely.
good stuff. Yeah. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show. Join us next week as we talk with Scepter Brewing Arts. For more craft beer info, follow us online. We are Beer Guys Radio on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week, and don't forget to drink local. Cheers.